Listen to The Curious Case of Benjamin Button by Francis Scott Fitzgerald. Level B2, Oxford Reading University. Part 1.
The Buttons were a wealthy family from Baltimore with a clean reputation. One day, Roger Button's wife was at the hospital having their first child. Roger hurried to the hospital to see the child, hoping it would be a boy so he could be sent to study at Yale University. On his way to the hospital, he ran into the family doctor. The doctor declared angrily that he didn't want to see Roger or his family ever again, and that his reputation would be ruined. In the hospital, the nurses were also worried and frightened. Puzzled and anxious, Roger asked to see his newborn. "Come with me, Mr. Button," said one of the nurses, looking at him in disgust. They went down a hallway and entered a large room where babies lay in cribs. "Which one is mine?" asked Mr. Button. "There," she said. Roger's eyes followed her pointing finger. Then he froze. Wrapped in a heavy white blanket and partly stuffed into one of the cribs, there sat an old man, apparently about 75 years of age. His eyes were watery, and a long white beard hung from his chin. "Am I mad?" cried Mr. Button, his terror resolving into anger. "Is this some horrible hospital joke?" "It doesn't seem like a joke to us," replied the nurse severely. "And I don't know whether you are mad or not, but that is most certainly your child." "Are you my father or not?" demanded the old man in a cracking and ancient voice. "Because if you are, I wish you would get me out of this place and take me home." A ridiculous picture formed itself with frightening clarity in Roger Button's mind. A picture of himself walking through the crowded streets of the city with this horrible creature by his side. People would stop to speak to him, and what would he say? He was awoken from his stupor by the old man saying that he wouldn't be walking home wrapped in a blanket. He demanded clothes, as everything they could offer him at the hospital was too small. Mr. Button left the room, slamming the door violently. Mr. Button went to a shop to purchase clothes for his son. However, this proved to be extremely complicated because infant clothes were too small and boys' clothes did not suit a baby. Finally, he bought a fancy suit. Mr. Button's child was unimpressed, but he had no choice. He put on his clothes and walked home with his father. In the following days, Roger tried making his son, who was given the name Benjamin, look younger. Benjamin had his hair cut short, his beard shaved off, and his hair and eyebrows dyed an unnatural black. Still, all these efforts could not conceal the fact that the child's eyes were watery and tired, and his face wrinkled. Mr. Button insisted that Benjamin was and had to remain a baby. He was forced to play with toys and drink warm milk. After he protested, he was allowed to eat oatmeal as well as bread and butter. Benjamin, of course, was terribly bored by all that, so he sought better ways to pass the time. He smoked his father's cigars and read Encyclopedia Britannica. Benjamin created a great sensation in the city at first, but the beginning of the Civil War distracted the public, so the Buttons' reputation did not suffer as much. Still, people were puzzled, and so was Benjamin. He tried to find information about his case in a medical journal, but was unsuccessful. Benjamin's father wanted him to spend time with children his age. He took his son to the kindergarten, where Benjamin did not belong. He slept through the activities he was supposed to do. Instead, he developed a friendship with his grandfather, to whom he had often been compared. Though the comparison bothered the grandfather a lot at first, he soon grew fond of Benjamin, and they spent hours discussing the slow events of the day. By the time Benjamin was 12 years old, his parents had grown used to him. They no longer felt that he was different from any other child, except when some curious irregularity reminded them of the fact. But one day, a few weeks after his 12th birthday, while looking in the mirror, he noticed a change in his appearance. His hair looked gray and not white under the dye, and his skin seemed to be healthier. Thinking that he had grown, he went to his father and asked for permission to wear long pants. Mr. Button hesitated. "Well, I don't know. Long pants are usually reserved for boys who are 14, and you're only 12, he said. "But you have to admit, I am big for my age." "I was as big as you when I was 12, Roger protested, though in reality, it was a lie. In the end, a compromise was reached. Benjamin was allowed to wear long pants, but he had to play more with children his age and stop using his glasses and his cane. When he was 18, Benjamin looked like he was 50. His back had straightened, his voice had lowered to a pleasant baritone, his hair had become dark gray. That was when Mr. Button decided it was time Benjamin applied to Yale College. He passed his examination successfully, and he was accepted into the freshman class. A few days later, he was called to the registrar's office to discuss his schedule. "Good morning, Mr. Button," said the registrar politely. "I understand you are here to inquire about your son." "Why?" said Benjamin. "I am Benjamin Button. I am a freshman." "What? Surely you are joking." "Not at all." The registrar glanced at the papers in front of him. "But I have Benjamin Button's age down here as 18. You do not expect me to believe that this is your age." "Well, I am 18, said Benjamin, smiling tiredly. The registrar gave him a severe look, then pointed to the door. "Get out! Get out of college and get out of town! You are a dangerous madman," he said. Benjamin walked out of the office, stared at by half a dozen students in the hall. He took a couple steps, turned around, and repeated, "I am 18." He then walked out into the street, but he did not manage to escape unwanted attention so easily. A group, then a large mass of students followed him. They laughed and picked at him. "Look at the child genius! He thought this was the old men's home. Go up to Harvard!" Benjamin increased his pace, and soon he was running. He would show them, he would go to Harvard, and then they would regret their behavior. At 20 years old, Benjamin looked the same age as his 50-year-old father. He became an employee at his father's company, Roger Button & Co., Wholesale Hardware. They sold different goods for building and repairs, such as nails and hammers. In fact, the two became great companions, and one could even mistake them for brothers. Besides, this was the year when Mr. Button started taking Benjamin to fashionable dances. One night in August, they went to a dance in a fancy country house in Baltimore. Just as they approached, they saw a family getting out of their carriage. Among them was a stunning young woman. When Benjamin saw her, something curious happened inside of him. An almost chemical transformation. It was first love. Roger Button leaned towards his son and said, "This is young Hildegard Moncrief, the daughter of General Moncrief."
English audiobooks, courses with your favorite movie heroes, awesome word games, and much more. The whole English classroom for your level, in one place, in the EVA app. There are thousands of English books you can read and listen to. Grammar and vocabulary lessons with popular movie characters. Stop wasting your time. Go to appeva.com right now.
"Pretty little thing," said Benjamin coldly. "Dad, you might introduce me to her." They approached a group where Miss Moncrief was the center. Benjamin asked her if he could have a dance, and she said yes. Time dragged very slowly while he was awaiting his turn, anxious about all the youths crowded around Hildegard, looking at her in admiration. But when it was finally time for their dance, he felt relieved. "You and your brother got here just as we did, didn't you?" she asked as they were moving across the floor. Benjamin did not want to correct her because he remembered his embarrassment at Yale, so he nodded, smiled, and was perfectly content. "I like men your age. Young boys are so silly. 50, on the other hand, is a romantic age. I've always said that I would rather marry a man of 50 and be taken care of than marry a man of 30 and take care of him," said Hildegard. Later that evening, they had 2 more dances and discussed current matters, on all of which they seemed to agree. When Benjamin was driving back home with his father, he was too in love to pay attention to what Mr. Button was saying. He looked at his father distractedly, just as the eastern sky lit up with the first rays of light and sunshine came through the treetops. 6 months later, it was made known that Benjamin and Miss Hildegard Moncrief were engaged, the fact that deeply upset General Moncrief. The curious story of Benjamin's birth then re-emerged in the minds of the public, and all sorts of unrealistic rumors appeared around him. Newspapers published articles about Benjamin, and he became known as the Mystery Man of Maryland. There were so many stories that Hildegard denied all of them along with the true one. The true story, as is usually the case, did not become equally widespread. However, everyone conceded that General Moncrief was right at least on one point, that it was criminal for a girl as gorgeous as Miss Hildegard to marry a man who was obviously no younger than 50. It made no sense for General Moncrief to try to explain to her the poor health of men of 50, or those who looked 50, and the instability of the wholesale hardware business. Hildegard had chosen to marry, and that was what she did. There was at least one thing that Hildegard's friends were mistaken about. The wholesale hardware business saw great financial success, largely thanks to the youngest member of the firm. Needless to say, Baltimore and even General Moncrief eventually embraced Benjamin and Hildegard's marriage. In the next 15 years, Benjamin changed significantly. It began to be a pleasure to rise in the morning, to walk with an active step along the busy sunny street, to work with his boxes of hardware. At the time, they were shipping a lot of nails in wooden boxes. The boxes, of course, were fastened with nails. Once, Benjamin brought up an interesting suggestion. All these extra nails were supposed to be the property of the customer. This proposal was a great success and saved Roger Button and Company Wholesale Hardware more than 600 nails every year. Additionally, Benjamin became increasingly attracted by the fun side of life. Everyone who encountered him admired just how fit and healthy he looked. "He seems to grow younger every year," they would remark. And if old Roger Button now 65 years old, had failed at first to give a proper welcome to his son. Now he tried compensating for that with excessive praise. There was, however, one significant worry in Benjamin Button's life. His wife did not attract him anymore. At that time, Hildegard was a woman of 35 with a son, Roscoe. Early in their marriage, Benjamin had absolutely adored her, but as the years passed, she had become too dull, too settled, too boring. As a bride, she had been the one who had dragged Benjamin to dances and dinners. Now, it was the other way round. She went out socially with him, but without enthusiasm, swallowed by that passivity that visits us one day and never leaves until the very end. Benjamin's dislike for his wife grew stronger. At the beginning of the Spanish-American War, his home had so little appeal for him that he decided to join the army. With his business influence, he was appointed captain and proved to be so fit for the job that he was promoted surprisingly quickly. He was slightly wounded and received a medal. Benjamin had become so attached to the activity that he regretted to give it up, but his business required attention, so he resigned and came home. When Benjamin returned home, up in his room, he saw himself in the familiar mirror. He went closer and examined his own face with anxiety, comparing it after a moment with a photograph of himself in uniform taken just before the war. "Good Lord!" he said aloud. The process was continuing. There was no doubt of it. He looked now like a man of 30. Instead of being delighted, he was uncomfortable. He was growing younger. He was disturbed. His future seemed awful, incredible to him. When Benjamin came downstairs to Hildegard, she seemed slightly annoyed, as if she had noticed something was wrong. He decided to try approaching the subject at dinner. "Well," he remarked lightly, "everybody says I look younger than ever." "Do you think it is something to be proud of?" Hildegard replied in an unfriendly way. "I am not proud of it." "Well, then I think you can stop it," she declared. "How can I?" demanded Benjamin. "I can't help it." "You're just stubborn. You think you don't want to be like anyone else. You have always been that way, and you always will be. But just think how it would be if everyone else looked at things as you do. What would the world be like?" That was something he could not argue against. From that moment on, a deep and wide breach appeared between them. He was unable to understand just what about her had fascinated him so much in the beginning. Benjamin also became increasingly invested in partying. He would go out to every fashionable evening in Baltimore, chatting and dancing with the prettiest of the young married women and finding their company charming. His wife, in the meantime, sat among the old ladies, looking at him with reproach. "What a pity," everyone around them would say. "Such a young man tied to a wife who is at least 20 years older." They had forgotten, as people inevitably do, that several decades back, their parents were making similar remarks. Benjamin found many new interests to compensate for his unhappiness at home. His new sociability affected his business to some extent, but he was not really worried. He thought he would soon hand it on to his son, who had recently graduated from Harvard. There was only one thing he hated: appearing in public with his wife. By that time, she was 50, and the sight of her made Benjamin feel depressed and ridiculous. One September day, a few years after Roger Button & Co. wholesale hardware was inherited by Roscoe Button, a man apparently about 20 years old, entered as a freshman at Harvard University in Cambridge. He did not make the mistake of announcing that he was over 50, nor did he mention the fact that his son had graduated from the same institution 10 years before.
Stay with us for part 2.
Don't forget to hit the bell to get a notification about our next video. And now, listen to another audiobook.